Every year in Australia, sometime in the middle of May, school children in years 3, 5, 7 and 9 sit a test of literacy and numeracy called NAPLAN, or the National Assessment Program for Literacy and Numeracy. There are 3 separate test papers in the literacy component of NAPLAN: a writing paper, a reading paper, and a language conventions paper. Language conventions are grammar and spelling. In this video, I'm going to explain the writing paper in more detail. What do the children have to write about? And what is their writing being assessed on? Nobody knows what the writing topic will be each year, but we do know that it will either be a narrative, where the children must tell a story, or a persuasive piece, where the children must argue a point. The students are given a prompt on the day of the test and some guidelines to help them get started. So here's an example of a narrative prompt, where the children are asked to write a story inspired by an empty box. And here's an example of a persuasive text prompt, where the children are asked to think about, should animals be kept in cages? The students only have 40 minutes to write their piece, which isn't very long. So they should spend that time focusing on the quality of their writing and not the quantity. There are no marks given just for writing a lot. So what do they get marks for? Well, there are 10 marking criteria, and each of them is weighted a little differently. You can get 6 marks for audience, spelling, and sentence structure. You can get 5 marks each for punctuation, vocabulary, ideas. You can get 4 marks for narrative techniques, or 5 for persuasive techniques. You get 4 marks for text structure and text cohesion. And finally, you can get 2 marks for paragraphing. Let's take a quick look at what each of those really means. Audience is about how well your writing engages the audience and makes them want to read on. Sentence structure is about whether the student correctly forms their sentences, but also whether they use different kinds of sentences to tell their story well. Spelling, to score top marks in spelling, the children will need to spell difficult and challenging words, not just words that are easy to sound out. And that brings us to vocabulary. Students need to use words that are not just our everyday spoken words. So our children might say they feel scared, but in their writing they could be petrified or terrified. Ideas, that's obvious. How well can they communicate their ideas depends upon how well they do all the other things, like how do they structure their writing, and does it all hang together in a cohesive and logical way. They'll also get marks for their use of narrative writing techniques like metaphor and simile, or persuasive techniques, depending on what kind of writing they've been asked to do. All students are marked against the same criteria. Whether you're in year 3 or year 9, you're assessed against the same criteria. The people who mark the writing, usually teachers employed for the job, don't know what year level they're marking. They're simply marking the writing against a set of criteria and giving a total mark out of 47 for narrative or 48 if it's a persuasive piece. That mark is then converted to a band level, and that's what you see on your child's NAPLAN report. It's very important to remember that the mark your child receives might not be an accurate description of their writing ability. They won't be any worse than the mark they receive, but they might be better. Perhaps they weren't feeling well on the day. Perhaps they feel stressed in test conditions. Perhaps the writing topic just had them stumped. You do need to know a good deal about a topic in order to persuade somebody. In 2018, The students had to persuade the reader of the worth of a technological innovation. It's a big ask to come up with a persuasive argument in just 40 minutes. Give it a try yourselves. So, the NAPLAN writing test really is just a snapshot of what a child can do and write in 40 minutes one day in May. It's one indication of how they can write, but it's not the whole picture of what they can do.